Hey everyone, I hope you're doing great and following the 3H's of the channel. In this video, it's all about weird things that happen in Virginia. So, if that sounds like something you're interested in, pull up a stump with me and let's jump into it. Thank you for watching. So this isn't super scary like some other stories. This is more of a really cool and wild experience I had. So when I was younger, I hunted quite frequently in the Appalachian woods. I was sitting in a tree. At this point it had been days, and I had not seen a single deer, which is pretty unusual in these particular woods. Hours were passing. The woods were still, deathly silent. Since not much was going on, I decided that I should close my eyes and maybe meditate on the quiet peace of the woods. Suddenly, I get a vision of myself unloading my rifle and then setting it down on the ground. After this vision, I also have a vision of an old man speaking very wise things to me, although I cannot remember anything specific. After some time, I snap out of these visions, and I decide, well, I have nothing to lose. I'll try it. I'll unload my rifle and place it on the ground, just as the vision showed me. Almost immediately after laying down the rifle, a herd of deer ran up on me. They surrounded me, and they just hung out there, close to me for a long while. I was astonished by this, quote, coincidence. I sat and watched them while they sniffed and walked around me. Eventually, they all wander off. The rest of the day, I just left my rifle unloaded and ended up seeing multiple massive bucks and does who passed by and who came within feet of me. Each of them seemed comfortable and not on edge as they usually are. It was a pretty surreal experience for me. It gave me a lot more respect for nature. So I'm a Virginia native, and this is something weird that happened when I was 13. I decided to try hunting for the first time. I was with my granddad and my dad. We aren't hicks, we just like to hunt, I guess. If you're wondering a general idea of where we were about 20 miles from Seaville, in the middle of pretty much nowhere, miles from the next closest human. A 15-minute drive into the woods from a road that has only been used by my family when we hunt, and maybe a couple lost travelers. We arrived at our cabin, a bit unkempt and seemingly abandoned. Walls in the big main room are lined with skulls and deer antlers and bear skins and all that stuff. We unpack our things and settle in the cabin. It's about 3 in the afternoon, so there's no time to hunt today. Granddad and Dad give me a walk around the property. We get to a very remote tree stand. Grandpa tells me that no one ever uses it because it's like 2 miles from the cabin. As we arrive, some smell is very awful. It smells like a worse skunk. I don't know how to describe it, it just stunk. Grandpa and Dad smell it too, and we all decide to turn back because of the rancid odor. The next day, Dad walks me out to my tree stand. I'm armed with a .30-06, a gun that I'm familiar with and I can shoot well with. I get to my tree stand, where I'll be spending the next 10 to 12 hours, waiting for anything I can hunt. I say farewell to Dad, wish him luck, and ascend my post. For the next 8 hours, nothing happens. It's boring, and I didn't see anything. I decide to just head back to the cabin to get something to eat. So I descend the ladder of the stand. I throw my rifle over my shoulder and get on my way. It's about a 20-minute walk to our cabin. There's no real clear path to follow. You kinda just have to wander through the woods in the cabin's direction until things start to look familiar. So fast forward about 10 minutes or so, I was walking past a group of seemingly random evergreen trees, so thick that I can barely imagine anything of substantial size navigating them. There were small paths along the bottom, which I assumed were used by foxes, maybe small coyotes or something. Looking at these evergreens, I hear something rustling, running very quickly through the fallen leaves at the bottom of a nearby hill, roughly 200 feet away. I turn around and ready my weapon. This could be the moment I've been waiting for. I can't see anything, but I still hear movement. I decide to start moving to get a better look. Between a large forked tree, I finally get a decent look at what's causing the ruckus. A very large black dog is sniffing around, and I don't mean large as in a husky or a German shepherd large. This thing was absolutely massive. At the time, I was around 5'11", and this thing easily was up past my elbows while down on all fours. It was vicious looking, perhaps feral. Its eyes were yellow-orangish in color. I watched it for a few minutes, just wandering about the woods. Eventually, it runs off into the forest and out of my sight. I continue my trek home, thinking about what exactly I just saw. Perhaps a large wolf or something. I get back to the cabin and make myself some food. I wait for my uncle, my dad, and my grandpa to return to home base. My uncle gets back first. He says he found a small pile of rotting deer carcasses out at the remote tree stand. He said it seems like they had been eaten. On the way back, he said that he heard something big moving very fast through the woods, but he never saw anything. I don't know if this is paranormal or not, or if it really is like a dog man or a werewolf, but it's the only spooky thing that's ever happened to me. Alright, I had some freaky shit happen to me. Here's the background. I was a student at VCU. I was studying biology. I was, at the time, taking an ornithology class about birds, and I have to take pictures of them every week and post them on a certain website. At the time, I was in Northern Virginia for a spring break, so sorry if my story is long, but let's begin. So I get to Roundtree Park in Fairfax County. It was 3:30 p.m., a Sunday, March 13th, 2016. I was there to, you guessed it, take pictures of birds. I see that the trail is closed off due to a broken bridge that goes over a stream and goes on to a newly made detour. So I decided to say screw that and go around the closure and continue on the main trail. A little walk down the trail and I find stepping stones. They are about 10 across and are there for when it floods. I thought to myself, that's kinda cool, and I stepped across them. I then decided to venture off and follow the stream. The water was super high since it was raining. Since streams lead to bigger bodies of water, I followed it, hoping to find some stupid ducks or some other shitty type of bird. After about a 25-minute follow, this stream led to a massive reservoir. I'm guessing it was around 5 feet deep. You could probably swim in it on a hot day, and it has a beach area to chill on. For some reason at this point I was beginning to feel really eerie. I don't know how else to explain it. It's like that feeling like something is watching you. I look to my right and see nothing. Then I look up to my left and I see a birdhouse, but it isn't one of those small birdhouses. It was a really experimental birdhouse, placed there by someone doing some kind of scientific research. I move closer to the birdhouse and I slowly see that it's obviously been pried open on the bottom. These birdhouses are normally super sturdy, and it takes a lot of strength just to even open the bottom. I'm guessing a bear or something strong as hell tried to open it because you could see claw marks on it. This didn't really scare me though. As I look straight after examining the bird case, I see a staircase, a metal staircase in the middle of the woods with nothing around it. I'm guessing that it used to be part of a hunting stand or something, but it's missing the top part of the staircase. Now I know my internet stories and I know my creepypastas, and I thought, F that, I didn't even go close to it. I continued to go left, parallel to the reservoir, keeping my distance from the staircase. As I continue parallel to the left down the stream and past the staircase, I spot a couple of ducks, so I whip out my iPhone and take pictures of them. At this point, a really strong breeze flows through the forest, and I see a womanly figure about 40 yards ahead of me, walking ungodly fast through the brush. It was like her feet were walking, but she was more gliding across the ground. I can't see her face. She was wearing a black trench jacket and walking as fast as some people can sprint. At this point, I'm a little scared, but more drawn back at the fact that there was another person a mile or a mile and a half into the forest. Since I don't want any problems, I stay quiet, crouched, and I tried to use my phone, but it died. I fully charged it before. I was pretty dumbfounded at this. As the person's figure begins to slowly fade away, I try again to turn on my phone, and it turns on with 82% battery. I just don't understand this. I never had battery problems before or after, but that day, my phone was doing that. I continued to go left, parallel to the stream, and find a path and a hill about 200 feet tall. I decided to snap a picture of it. It looked beautifully creepy. The hill seemed to cast a shadow, even though there was no sun out today. I look at the picture under the gallery, and then I took out my iPhone, and it says 78% battery. I started to follow the trail up the hill, and as I'm walking up the hill, the forest gets dark. Every step that I am taking, it seems that less and less light is coming through the clouds. The sounds of raindrops hitting the leaves are slowly fading. I can breathe, but I cannot hear my own breaths being taken, and the sound of my heartbeat is getting louder and louder. I reach the top of the hill, and my heartbeat is now the only thing I can hear. All the sounds of the forest are drowned, and it seems like it's 8:30 p.m. at night. I'm deaf. I try clapping, and no sound is made. As soon as I realize that I'm deaf, I know my adrenaline kicks in, and I'm in shock at this point. I pull up my phone to try and play music to see if I am deaf, but my phone is dead again. I tried to turn it on 3 times, and the piece of shit does not want to turn on. I put it back in my pocket. I look forward, and I see 3 shed-like houses in a horizontal linear formation about 20 yards ahead of me on this hill, and I smell a rotten, foul smell. It smelled like rotten chicken and dog shit, and with a very putrid, sour aroma. The only senses I have at this time are my smell and my sight. I look at the middle shed, and that woman from before walks from behind it. Her hood is covering her eyes and nose, and all I see is a slight grin with her teeth showing. At this point, I'm about to shit my pants. I quickly run down the trail and back to the bottom of this hill, and as I'm running, the forest begins to get brighter. The sounds of raindrops hitting the leaves are back. I can hear my own breaths, and I can hear birds. I look back at the hill to see if this woman is following me, but she's nowhere to be seen. I continue to sprint through the brush, tripping and following for about 10 minutes. I'm following the stream back. I start laughing because every 8th or 9th step I'm falling, so I felt safe. I slowed down to walk the rest of the way back to the closure of the trail. Can someone explain to me what happened? I even turned my phone back on when I got into my car, and it was at 68%, but all the photos that I had taken that day were gone. My phone has never had that issue before or after that. I don't know what it was, like a homeless encampment or something, but maybe it was an apparition, and I can't explain the lack of the sounds and me going deaf. I was really spooked. Just a preface, I think that Williamsburg has a lot of weird shit going on due to a number of factors. It's old as hell, former Indian territory, and it's close to Camp Peary, which is a CIA base. I'm going to try and go through things in chronological order, and I'll save some of the more especially weird things for the end. The earliest, explicitly weird memory I have from Williamsburg happened the year that my family moved there. It was early middle school for me, and I guess it was fairly benign, but definitely weird. We were dicking around in colonial Williamsburg, which is the historical section of town. It was a bunch of old buildings and people in costumes, yelling at you for dressing in an odd attire. My father and I had gone into one of the larger buildings that wasn't regularly visited by tourists, just to look around and see what was all in there. I went to the second floor of the building, while my father remained on the first. Going up the stairs, I heard what sounded like a woman lecturing or giving a presentation, so being nosy, I went to investigate. Despite my best attempts to channel the spirit of Sherlock Holmes, I couldn't pinpoint where the voice was coming from, despite checking every room that I thought it could come from. It seemed to bounce from room to room, evading me. Eventually, I got spooked by this and went to find my father, who claimed to have heard the voices as well, but on the first floor. At this point, we were both freaked out, and we left. When we got out of the building and met back up with the rest of my family, my mother was really mad, pissed even, and claimed that we had been in the building for over an hour, and my father hadn't answered any of her calls. We were sure that it hadn't been more than 15 minutes, but sure enough, over an hour had passed. This instance was fairly benign, like I said, and I promise later events get much weirder or spookier. It's more just an example of the stories most families have surrounding colonial Williamsburg. Now this second occurrence is realistically a nothing burger, but it still scared me at the time. Neighborhoods in the suburban South are mostly new developments of tightly packed homes with a central clubhouse or pool or something like that. They suck if you want privacy or to own land, but they're great if you're a family with kids because you'll be surrounded by other families with kids. There's plenty going on, and you can just dump your kids outside without having to worry too much. I lived in one of these neighborhoods. On the bus ride home one day, an older kid was telling me and my friend about this supposedly haunted place that he called the Sawmill. It was supposedly only a couple miles from our neighborhoods. We grabbed some supplies after the bus dropped us off and made our way to the Sawmill with the older kid as our tour guide. This place was in some relatively deep woods that surrounded our neighborhood. Admittedly, we got lost, very lost. After about an hour of romping around the woods, we came upon a clearing, and we could see the outline of a large warehouse-type building. Upon entering this clearing, the clouds opened up on us, and it started pouring rain. Because of this, we agreed to just leave. In reality, we were all super scared and didn't want to be murdered by whatever demon lived in the sawmill. We jogged back to our neighborhood, and I vividly remember feeling like we were being followed the entire time. The second we returned to civilization, the rain stopped, which justified our feelings that we just shouldn't be there. Turns out the place ended up being a pretty active homeless camp that ended up getting busted by the police. Or so I assumed, because by the time I was in high school, it was abandoned again. The sawmill actually became quite a cozy place for me and my friends, and we would regularly chill there. Like I said, it was just a nothing burger, but I wanted to include it just so I get everything. So by now, nothing much happened until I reached high school, which is where the good stuff starts happening. But the early expeditions into the unknown did not yield too much. To establish the cast of people, all the following events include members of my very tight-knit friend group, 8 of us in total, and I still talk to most of them regularly, if not daily. The first place that we went to was an abandoned building, a bank or a motel, I can't remember which, that was behind the cookout on the edge of town. This was really stupid, as it was known for a hangout for homeless addicts and just general drug abuse. Luckily, we weren't accosted by any dope fiends, and we just dicked around trying to get inside for maybe an hour or so. And if you're ever in the area, there's always Crawford Bridge. It was either on the edge of Williamsburg or Yorktown. I can't remember which, and I don't really feel like looking it up. The place is spooky as all hell, but popular, which really reduces the spook factor for someone like me. The legend is that after the war, a woman and her child were lynched there. If you park under the bridge and turn your car off for a minute or two, handprints will show up on all the exterior. We went there 3 times, and one time a single handprint showed up, but honestly, I never felt anything malevolent in this place. In fact, most of the time we're a bunch of average, everyday ghost hunters. We stopped going there once we found other, better places. Another instance, we parked at the bridge and explored the woods and fields surrounding the area. It was a nearly moonless night and foggy as all hell, so we got lost to an impressive degree. Not crazy, but it was quite uncomfortable, in a certain field that had a hill overlooking it. We constantly felt like we were being followed or watched. So, I just wanted to get those more lame stories out of the way, just to be comprehensive. Next, I'm going to get into the good stuff finally. So yeah, like I said, we're finally to the good stuff. These events happened in my junior and senior years of high school. Eastern State Mental Hospital was the first mental institution in the United States. It has gone through many periods of closure and rebuilding. Currently, it is partially open as of 2022. But a large section was entirely abandoned in the 1970s, I believe. My date could be wrong, but it's not important. I've attached a poorly labeled map as a reference. There were alleged patient mistreatments in the past, including abuse and lobotomies. Really, all the good stuff of a horror movie. Everyone in town agrees that it's haunted as all hell, and it's terrifying at night. Initially, my friends and I broke into the building that was labeled early visits. We entered the side facing the woods through a window that we forced open. The interior of the building is in terrible condition and quite dangerous. Ceiling panels fall, there's broken glass everywhere, and all the walls have asbestos in them. Nothing too significant happened in here, although I have heard voices, whisperings throughout the building that 2 of my friends have also confirmed hearing. We mostly just stole stuff and set off fire extinguishers, and there as our fear quickly subsided, following our first couple of visits. The building labeled Church on the map was a very large structure that resembled a church, but we're not really sure if it actually was. It took us many attempts to gain entry into this one, but eventually we managed to force a door open. This building was our introduction to an odd trend in the eastern state, the juxtaposition in levels of decay inside of buildings. The interior of the building was in pristine condition. There were even papers with employee records and newspapers that remained intact. Not much happened in this building either, as we only entered once. Finally, going out of order, but I figured I would continue the trend of buildings in good condition. One night, me and 2 others were traipsing throughout the property. I jokingly tried the doorknob of one of the buildings that we previously had attempted to get into. To our surprise, it opened without resistance, and we actually entered. This building, like the church, was untouched on the inside. Unlike the church, this building previously held patients. The atmosphere on the inside was incredibly oppressive, as all the surfaces inside were white and devoid of dust or mold, the norm for these buildings. The building itself was a single level. The door we entered through opened to a long hallway with rooms where the patients were kept on either side. We would call this building the children's ward, as there were drawings and scrawlings on the walls, as well as the tack boards throughout the rooms, which appeared to have been done by children. I wish we had explored this one more, but between the state of the building, the drawings, and the threat of being locked in the building should the door not open again, we were quite freaked out and left within half an hour. The building is not marked on this map, but I cannot find it on Google Earth. I'm going to cover some events that we had with the security and police now. I want to save the events of Building 4 for last. For the record, my friends and I were incredibly cautious when on this property. The last thing any of us wanted was to get arrested. Because of this, we had a set of rules, which honestly just amounted to always staying with the group, never pointing flashlights anywhere except the floor, to avoid shining them in outside windows, not using flashlights outside, and in the event that we were seen or some ship went down, we would bolt in different directions and then meet at this strip mall called Newtown that was a few miles away. The very first encounter we had was in building number 4, which I've attached a photo of. I'm going to skip describing the building because I want to save that for describing the things that we experienced in the building. We were on the 2nd floor and noticed multiple flashlights being shined through windows. As a result, we promptly dipped and fled to the woods, from where we watched figures scout around the building. Realistically, these guys were just security. Events similar to this started happening often near the end of our senior year and culminated in the next described encounter. The second run-in we had was incredibly odd, and the last time we went to Eastern State. At this point, we were pretty apprehensive of any criminal trespass due to an unrelated encounter with police where we were almost arrested and security being beefed up on the property. We had been on the property for less than 10 minutes, and we were making our way down the road to Building 1. The abandoned section was at a lower elevation than the active section. As a result, once you made your way there, you could not see any activity coming down the roads in your direction. It was an incredibly dark night, and we noticed the flash of headlights on the hill behind us. We figured it was just someone passing through, as the chances of security already being alerted were incredibly slim. However, the headlights grew alarmingly bright as they barreled down the hill at us. We ran into the woods south of the road and were separated. I went prone about 10 feet into the tree line to watch the vehicle, which was a truck with a large searchlight mounted on the bed. It was manned by someone, I assume a security guard. The truck then went further down the road to where my friends had entered the woods. I began making my way through the woods toward Newtown, and eventually met up with a friend I'll call Clyde. I was incredibly relieved to have found him, as being in the woods alone at night is terrifying, especially when you're being hunted by security at an abandoned mental hospital. Clyde and I slowly made our way toward the nearest road so we could get to Newtown without trespassing further. A few hundred feet into the woods, Clyde stopped and motioned for me to look at something. I scanned the gaps in the trees in front of me and noticed a large figure standing still, presumably looking back at us. I called out to the person, thinking it was someone from our group. The person responded by taking out a large flashlight and aiming it at us, at which point we both booked it. Thankfully, we made it out of the woods and were able to reach Newtown and meet the rest of our group. The actual paranormal stuff that happened there will be in the next one. So, Building 4 has a long history. All of the information I know concerning it is hearsay, although I'm sure there are articles that could give you a thorough history of the building. John Galt, the doctor who ran the place for a while, died in there due to an overdose and still walks the grounds at night. It burned down at least once, but I want to say it happened twice, and then was rebuilt. Allegedly, a number of people died in the fires, but I'm not entirely sure. Our first venture into the building was incredibly tense, as we had to shimmy along a white ledge below the windows that you see in this picture. This caused us to take half an hour just to get into the building, and if anyone fell, there would almost certainly be broken legs. The interior of the building was similar to the first one we entered in that it was rotting. Unlike the first building, there were significantly more things left in this building. Beds, records, cleaning and maintenance supplies, and some really old medical equipment that was just strewn about. We cautiously made our way through the building, going up to the 3rd floor and onto the roof to make sure that we were alone initially, and then into the basement. In the basement, we found a busted window which we would use for future entrances and exits. On this initial visit, I am certain that I heard laughing come from somewhere deeper in the building, and 2 of my friends later confirmed hearing the same. Despite a general feeling of unease, nothing too bad had happened to us during our initial trips. Because of this, we grew very confident in our ability to traverse Eastern State. One night, a group of 4 of us entered the building through the window that we had found on one of our first trips. The group included me and friends I will call Smith, SV, Kevin, and as I stated at this point, we had been in all the main buildings dozens of times, and we were pretty confident in our knowledge of the layout and everything inside. We were going from room to room, looting whatever stupid shit that we could find, and SV picked up a long metal rod that's important in a bit. We worked our way to the middle of the basement, at which point Smith called out to us, saying that he had found a long hallway. I questioned this, as we had thoroughly explored all the buildings at this point and never seen this hallway, but sure enough, he was correct. The hallway was deep enough that our flashlights could not reach the end of it, so we began making our way down it. The hallway was odd in a number of regards. First, in that it was on a noticeable downward slope, which we had not experienced in any other building. Second, it was completely barren. And third, in that once we got about 50 feet in, we realized that it was flooded slightly. Despite this, we continued, as the water was only about ankle height at its deepest. After a few minutes of walking, we reached a point where our flashlights could hit the end of the path. We froze, dead in place. We saw a figure at the end of the hallway, and as soon as we snapped out of our initial fear and sprinted back to the beginning of the hall, we reached the doorway and stopped to catch our breath. We confirmed what each of us had seen, and decided that someone must have set up a mannequin to scare people. Because of this, we turned and made our way back through the hallway, until we reached the same point as before. The figure was facing away from us, staring straight at the wall in front of it, and it had not moved an inch since we last saw it. It had long hair, and it was dressed in a shirt and pants. After a minute or 2 of staring, SV spoke up and yelled, "If you don't move, I'm gonna hurl this javelin at you," which was the rod that I mentioned earlier. The figure responded by turning 90 degrees at an inhumanly fast rate and then crawling into the wall. At this point, we ran from the hallway all the way back to our car, which was easily 2 miles away. This was the most intense fear I've ever experienced in my life, and if I go the rest of my life without matching it, I will be a happy man. The next week, we got our whole group together and headed back. We made our way to the end of the hallway again and found that the figure had crawled into a small tunnel that went on for at least a mile, and it connected to many of the other buildings. Sadly, we were unable to explore it in as much depth as we would have liked to, as the truck encounter had happened a few weeks after this, and we decided to stop exploring as we would graduate soon. In total, Williamsburg is a fantastic place to live and raise a family, but there is an innumerable amount of oddities and paranormal spots all throughout the town. So those encounters were pretty crazy, weren't they? If any of them stuck out to you, let me know which one that it was. If you have one of your own, feel free to send it to me in the description below at the email. If you would like to donate to the channel, there's super thanks here on YouTube, as well as in the description. I have a PayPal and a Patreon. And with that, I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, then please like and subscribe or consider doing so. Or maybe you might want to watch another video. I'll put a couple up on the screen here. And I'll see you in the next one. Thank you for pulling up a stump with me, and thank you for watching. Have a good week.